if I should write a check that will really, really work of £10 million for you today, what are you going to do?
Ooh, okay, this is one. £10 million. Okay, I would probably, I don't really know what £10 million even is. Like,
what would you advise somebody who wants to come into your sector? What is a roadmap give to them to get to this where sort of sustainable, have an impact, to balance?
I think the first bit of advice I would give is,
how do you balance tokenism from being authentic?
I think that is a really difficult issue for a lot of organisations in particular, and I think specifically when it comes to representation. Because I think no matter what, we all want to be able to show that we are diverse. We all want to be able to show that we're authentic. But how do you do that? A photo shoot is inauthentic. This podcast is inauthentic. We're sitting here to come and say a thing. And so I think it's always going to be really difficult. And I think for us, our primary focus is obviously kind of neurodivergent individuals, but we welcome anybody that considers themselves to be underrepresented to come and take part in any of the services, workshops, everything that we do. I think when it comes to like a marketing perspective, it's obviously very, because I think, I don't know if you look at our social media, but we hardly ever post, and it's because we're so busy doing things. Maybe once we get to a point where we're like, okay, let's actually sit down and plan some content, that is when those conversations kind of come up.
Hi, Trudi.
Hi, it's lovely to be here. Thank you.
What's particular, I'll take the question again. What need did you wanted to fill with Wild and Kind?
So when we first started Wild Kind, it was a organization that was originally kind of just built from pure social impact and the identifying a need for, it was really thinking about loneliness and isolation back in the very early days. We, a couple of friends, we were kind of in our mid to late 20s. We realized that we didn't have those opportunities to meet new people anymore. In the same way that you maybe did when you were younger, socializing, a lot of it was built around alcohol and having to spend money to go out to expensive places. And so just kind of for fun, we ran some craft hangouts
Oh, nice.
at my flat, just, some beer and collage making. And I think we just put out some Facebook posts, and like people came that we didn't know, not just kind of friends, people came that we didn't know, and we thought, oh, this is fun, this is cool. And so we did them more and more, and the more that we did these events, the more we realized people were kind of showing up. And again, that we didn't know were coming on their own, a lot of people with anxiety. And we kind of realized, oh, there's this need for, social spaces, particularly at the time the focus was on women and people with marginalised genders. And we, the need kind of just developed as not accidental, but just relatively organically because of our own needs and wants as women. And it just kind of snowballed from there, really. That was, that's not necessarily the focus that we have at the moment, but that's really where it started.
So, does that mean the scope has gradually changed or expanded or increased? What's the present scope now?
Well, now our focus is actually more on neurodivergent social entrepreneurs. So obviously over the years that has changed, but there's been like a relatively logical path to that change. When we first started, our focus was on women and people with marginalised genders because that was our experiences. We were doing a lot of craft hangouts because that again was the things that we wanted to do. And then at the time I had experience of running a small brand. So a lot of what we wanted to do was help startup creatives get into the creative industry. Now, obviously, as time has gone on and we've gone through huge economic challenges, as we all know, in the last 8 years, my experiences and my knowledge and my skills have also changed as well. So in the early days, it was really about, a kind of focus on creatives and creating spaces. And it's not that we don't identify with those demographics anymore. And it's not that we don't support those demographics anymore. It's just that through all of the challenges in building a business through pandemic, which was the first, there was obviously things before that, Brexit and stuff. The pandemic, for everybody, that was a huge thing. But now with the cost of living crisis, and Wild Kind has grown a lot, and then, we've lost a lot of money as well, and then we've kind of got it back to a point where it's breaking even. But I think for me, I just love helping people and I love sharing my wisdom and my knowledge. But it's no longer a kind of focus on the creative industries, which was my kind of experience in the beginning. It's now on third sector. And obviously, being neurodivergent, one of the groups of people that I feel like I can relate well to and explain things well to is other neurodivergent people as well. So it's just kind of taken a little bit of an organic path, like I think a lot of social enterprises follow.
So I would like to know more about the early stage of these of Wild and Kind. You did mention that you started from your living room, getting friends together in their 20s, your friends together when you are still in your 20s, and you sort of gradually progress. Was there a point, was there anything you saw that made you decided that I have to do this? Something like, I cannot but do this. Was there any moment like that for you?
Absolutely. And I think it was really I think we'd been running these kind of workshops and hangouts for maybe a couple of months or so. And we'd started them in my flat. And then I actually ended up in a working collective because I was running my kind of small brand at the time, called the Glasgow Collective. I had a studio there and they had a big, co-working space. They had some area that we could use for our workshops. And so they kind of leveled up. We were able to have more people come. We were able to, they had a big kind of kitchen, so we could do baking and things like that. We did like a cookie night.
Wow.
And there was a few people that came on their own that had anxiety and like visibly so. Sometimes when you meet somebody and you can tell that they're feeling really, really nervous and anxious in the situation. But they would come on their own again. That's like a big step for people. And then they would come again the next week and then they would, come again. And before you know it, they're telling you how this has just become such a valuable thing for them
Mm.
to be able to leave the house, to have something to do in the evening. There are a lot of people. And again, this is before the pandemic. So back then we're trying to say to funders like, oh, there's actually an issue with loneliness and isolation. They're like, is there really? But actually it's, I think for people, particularly in their 20s, you finish uni, you go and get a job, and if you're not kind of geographically close to like your friends, it can become really, really isolating. So I think it was recognizing that for a lot of young people, and again, our particular focus was on women and people with marginalized genders, but it, realizing that spaces like that could actually be a real lifeline for people to be able to have a space, like a third space. I didn't really know the phrase third space at the time. But yeah, in the early days, that was the initial kind of like aha moment that made us think, okay, this is something that we can do, therefore we should do it. Probably a little bit of that social responsibility coming into it, being like, okay, I should be the person to to make this happen. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's that's particularly interesting. And I love the fact that it's a need that you started solving for gradually. Then it's expanded over time. It was not the other way around when somebody thinks of an idea and starts uh, trying to solve for a problem that really do not exist.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will have seen a lot of that around where when somebody creates a solution for a problem that does not exist. You started from the problem, something you have people around who identify to have this problem. You solved it for them. It was from your room. Then, you went outside. It's becoming bigger. So the next question will be a sort of follow up to that. Do you feel entrepreneurship, being a founder, did you think it was something you had to grow into? Or was there anything in your past that prepared you for what you are doing now?
I mean, it's a funny one because I think a lot of people that maybe start a business or a social enterprise, I think a lot of us didn't really have prior experience. Um, and I was a relatively rowdy young person. I didn't fall into, um, my education was not great in terms of exams and whatnot. I think that's a very common problem for a lot of people with ADHD, particularly when they're undiagnosed. Um, and then I did eventually go to art school, and I was a nanny for years, and so I kind of flipped about a lot of careers. But I think there was a point where I realized I cannot be an employee, if that makes sense. I don't deal well with having kind of authority and hierarchy structures and whatnot. And so I think there's maybe something internal within me that is making me more likely to be I think there's something within me that makes me more likely to follow the path of entrepreneurship, and I think that might be the same for other people. Um, but it's yeah, I think there's definitely something that's kind of in your blood with it more so than but more so than something preparing you for it. And obviously, when I did go to art school and then I finished up and um I started a small fashion brand, and it was from my flat. I did well with it, but it wasn't I didn't really push it to maybe what it could have been, but I think that probably gave me the initial taste of running a business, if that makes sense. So like the chin of things and making lots of mistakes and the stuff that you learn in the early stages. So I think that definitely was maybe part of the building block as well. But I think for me, a lot of it actually just felt very intuitive, yeah, and natural and just okay. And I think for a lot of people, it's that, again, that kind of eureka moment of, oh, hey, I've figured out what I'm trying to do.
That's nice. For most founders, and I have found that most of the time, the ones that succeed, because you've been doing this for the last 7, 8 years now, the ones that are able to keep long for that, long, 8 years is long. You have to wake up every day and do those kind of things every day. These people who are able to do that for that length of time are people who actually found a need to meet. If, for instance, you started it and nobody was interested in it for the last 8 years, I'm sure you would have stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, which I want us to go back a little to the early stages of Wild and Kind. How was it?
Well, the funny thing about us is we've kind of pivoted a lot. So there's probably a lot of people out there that know Wild and kind of as a slightly different thing.
Different phases of it.
And in the very early days, because I had a background in embroidery, I did, like I said, I ran that kind of small brand and I used to do a lot of machine embroidery. And so when we first started and we realized, okay, there's this social need for, helping with loneliness and isolation. That's our social impact. How will we make money? Well, okay, I kind of know how to do embroidery, so that's going to be the thing that we make money from. But we quite quickly kind of realized that wasn't actually the path that we wanted. Like, we didn't want to just be churning out embroidered jumpers and t-shirts, and it was a good way to make money, but it wasn't necessarily the kind of the passion. So what we decided to do was, rather than us do the work for people, we would train people up. So we would teach people how to do embroidery, and we would teach people how to do printing, and we would take on a big space where we would have all of our equipment, a co-working space where people could come, rent the equipment. We would teach them studio spaces, just a really nice creative community space.
Wow.
And so we opened that early 2020. Yeah. Everybody's face when I say that. I mean, we had the key. Yeah, we literally had the keys for about 5 weeks, and a 6-year lease. So
On a 6-year lease.
yeah. Oh, things happen. So so that was our first kind of like, okay, things were going to plan. We were all really excited, and then that was our first probably like, oh, we need to think of a new direction. And at that point, we could have just closed. A lot of places did. We could have just said, "Oh, wow," then
Which is understandable.
yeah, this is a bad sign. Let's just close. But no, we decided to push through, and we were really, really grateful to have lots of support within the third sector. So there was lots of funding available to help us get through. We were able to invest in some more equipment, and then kind of shift the focus back to running a print and embroidery company where we were doing it for other people again, just like your typical print and embroidery company. And it just took off, and it did really well for a while.
During COVID?
During COVID, yeah. So I think I think year 1 turnover was maybe about £5,000, next to nothing. Year 2 was about 25,000. Again, we were kind of finding our feet. And then year 3 was about 180,000.
So yeah. Making the bag.
So it was a huge jump in terms of turnover, but equally that was stressful, you know, growing so fast and all of a sudden needing to hire
Hire
people to come in. And we were relatively inexperienced in terms of running a business, being employers. But it grew for a while. Again, we were able to get more funding to keep building things up. And then we got to a point where we got the Catalyst fund from Firstport, which is social investment. So it's a loan, it's not a grant. And we we got that through, and we hired a salesperson, and we were going to have this big push into embroidered workwear. So, it was a good industry to be getting into. And then the cost of living crisis just swooped in, and all of a sudden, a lot of the companies we were going to be working with were, saying, actually, we're going to put a hold on stuff that's not necessarily, and we were doing, high quality, sustainable, ethical, so that higher price point, and it was just a nightmare. And it just didn't work. And sometimes it happens, things just don't work. So that's kind of what brought us back around to, even though, I say the kind of pre-pandemic plan, obviously it's not necessarily the same demographic now, because we're taking a lot of the skills and experience we've had over the years to work with a demographic that's going to value or receive kind of value more from what we're doing. But yeah, that was kind of a little bit of the wobbly story of it all.
That's quite interesting. I love the trajectory of 5K to 25K to 180K.
Yeah.
Now we are in the.
And it's kind of come back in there as well, but here we go.
That's nice. That's nice. Let's talk about money a little bit. If you were to start Wild and Kind again tomorrow morning, with no money, what are you going to do?
I mean, it would probably be easier to start it again tomorrow with no money than it was to start it again with lots of debt. Because when we had our hard reset, we had a huge amount of debt. So if I was to start tomorrow with no money, like I say, it'd probably be slightly easier. I think there's probably a lot of things I would change. I don't think it's good to live with regret too much, because I think some of the most valuable lessons I've learned have been when things have gone disastrously wrong, because you have to, you find out so much about yourself. You kind of find so much about, people and how to be how you figuring out who you want to be as a leader and who you want to be as an employer. I think it's probably a better way to explain it. But God, that's a trick. It's funny because I think I would actually probably do something different, and not because of not enjoying, because I love what I do, but I think there's so many. I think sometimes when you've built something for a long period of time, I think there is a point for everybody where you get to a point where you might say, well, actually, I've kind of done what I've set out to do. What's next? I think if I was to start, and I'm a problem solver, I love puzzles and I love new opportunities. And so, yeah, I think if I was to start again tomorrow, I would actually be like, oh, let's kind of maybe do something different. I don't know. It's a funny one to think about. But I think when it comes to the finances in general as well, the funding landscape is totally different now than it was when I started. Well, I think there's just less funding, more people looking for it, and I think that makes it quite difficult.
It's much more competitive now to get funding.
I think as well with AI, I think AI, pros and cons, but for me being dyslexic, being able to have tools to help me write and be able to dictate and write and whatnot, very, very helpful. But I think for funders and assessors, the quality of applications they must get must be so much higher now, because everybody can use AI to help them write it. So I don't know, it must be so much more difficult to assess these things. Yeah.
I've never thought of that before.
Yeah.
So we are still talking about the early stages
Yeah.
of Wild and Kind. What was the simple, small decision that you made that made the most significant impact, like the most leveraged decisions you made while starting up Wild and Kind?
Small decisions impact. It's hard to think of any one, and I mean, I think it's
Decision.
well, I think when you think back, so much happens. And I think, you have decisions that you make because it's an exciting decision and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's
Let's-
do this or let's do that. And then you kind of have decisions that you have to make because, the shit's hit a fan and you're like, okay, we need to figure this out. I think in the early stages, in fact, probably one of the biggest decisions that actually really, really shaped everything, even though at the time it felt like a disaster, was deciding to take on the lease for a 2,000 square foot space when previously we had just operated from a 300 square foot office. So we
From 300 to 2,000.
from 300 square foot to 2,000 square foot. So that decision, and actually the funny thing is I kind of wanted to do that about a year prior to when we did it. This would have been maybe only like a year and a half after starting Modern Kind. But we the person that I was kind of like running things with at the time was a little bit hesitant about making such a big leap when we were kind of such early stages. So I was kind of like, okay, that's fine. Let's kind of hold off and see. But actually, had we made that decision early on, maybe it would have been a disaster. Even though the decision we made at a later point at the time felt like a disaster at the time, everything has led to where we are just now. And had we not taken on that big unit, maybe we would have closed because maybe the pandemic would have come in and we'd taken a smaller space and it felt too much at the time. I think, you can always look back in hindsight and think, oh, I wonder if we'd done that or I wonder if we'd done that. But actually, ultimately, where we're at just now, and there's still difficulties, but it's those early decisions that kind of, at the time maybe made us feel stuck. But
Wow, that's cool. I have a lot of people. I know some couple of people who run business in this kind of space.
yeah.
I don't think I can do it. They just because of the next question I'm going to be asking you, because you are first of all focused on social impact, not profit. How do you balance that against cash flow? You have to pay your staff. You can't tell your staff stories. You need to pay people. You have payroll. You have overheads.
Yeah.
How do you balance that? How do you balance that?
With great difficulty and sometimes not. I think, and again, over the years, because we've had so many ups and downs, we've had to change so many times. There's been times where, we've had to let people go. There's been times where we have had to, take out grants or loan funding to be able to do what we need to do. There are times where there hasn't been enough money and I've had to put money in myself. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that behind a lot of successful businesses, actually there's a bit of financial privilege there as well. So for me, for example, being able to, in the very early days, I sold my flat to be able to take some money to put in to cover wages and some equipment and whatnot. But not everybody has the ability to do that. Not everybody has the means to do it. And I think sometimes people look at successful businesses and they think, oh, but why haven't I been able to do that? Quite often there's hidden privileges at play. And we've still got a lot of debt. We're not necessarily, kind of out of the woods in terms of, if we can break even every month just now, that's great. But it's really, really hard. And I think I guess a lot of it is as well as how you approach it. Like I always try and be really transparent about, finances when it comes to staff. In the past, I think people have not liked that because they don't want to know if it's not going
Oh, really?
well.
They
The-
just like to be.
Some
They don't want to know.
Well, I think it depends. I think some people want to know. I think some people don't want to know. And I've probably not always handled things as I should have in the past as well, because again, you're learning and you're growing. You don't really know what you're doing. I never really set out to be a boss. I don't really like the thought of being a boss. I never really want to be a boss. I think being a boss and being a leader are two different things. But when you're a small company though, you kind of have to wear all those hats at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think for anybody that's kind of starting out and thinking about like that balance of the, cash flow, because you've got social impact and you've got a business thing, it's really, really difficult. But I think sometimes for me, it's thinking about, when you look at a cash flow and you've got like income and outcome, and it's usually split up into different things. It can be really helpful to think about, trading income and social impact income as two different things, because it helps you better recognize what's making you a loss and what's actually making you money. You kind of just have everything in together, it can be harder to see. And I think if you're socially driven as well, the stuff you want to push through with is usually the stuff that's making you a loss. And if it's not clear in black and white, it can be easy to say, oh no, but that's fine. That, we do these workshops, we do these events, but that's, but sometimes you do have to kind of be brutally honest with yourself and say, actually though, can we keep doing that? And I think it's really common as well for most social enterprises to not always be business and social impact. Sometimes you have to be business that and you're not delivering any social impact. If we've gone through periods like that, we're only just getting back to a point where our social impact's kind of balancing out again. But then there's time where your social impact is going to be really high, like, especially early stages, but the business is not necessarily bringing much in. And so it fluctuates. And I think it's, I think with anything, knowing places to ask for help and support before things go bad is good, to be able to help pinpoint those things. Because if you can predict and see rocky weather ahead, you can better predict and prepare for it. Yeah.
So, I love the way you are doing your business and social impact. How do you measure success?
I think success means a different thing for different people, doesn't it? And I think for us, a lot of what we have been doing over the last few years hasn't been about growth as such. It's been about balancing out, and it's been about, reshaping the company from being, this print and embroidery company that everybody had grown to know us for so long into something completely different. And I think with that, it becomes for us, success is still being here.
Yeah.
And so
Still keeping the door.
still keeping the door open. And I think sometimes it's not that I don't think people should aim high, everybody should have goals, but I think sometimes we set those goals a little too high, and it can be really disappointing when we don't reach them. For a lot of people right now, given the economy, just keeping the doors open and balancing things out, that's good. And I think for some people, they think, oh no, well, I'm not successful because we're not bringing in loads of profit and we're not able to do that project. And it's like, no, it's hard. It's really, really hard just now. Keeping the doors open, that is success at the moment. Obviously, everybody would love to be a little bit higher with what they're doing, but
Thank you so much for sharing that. So from what I've learned now, keeping the door open, being able to do the day-to-day operations sometimes is the success we are looking for.
yeah,
Okay, because I'm asking that because the metrics you are going to be using to measure a proper business, another a business will be different from what we will use to measure your own.
yeah.
For a normal business, we can check the balance sheets, check the management account, and say, oh, we are not doing anything. What's going on? Or for you, I think because I'm thinking about what you just said, the fact that you sold your flats to do this. I was wondering, are you Mother Teresa? What's going on here?
No, definitely not. I think for me, I definitely have, I think because I have financial privilege and I'm by no means like, super wealthy or anything like that. But I think for me, I do have, I think it's like a kind of sense of social responsibility to use, maybe it's kind of like redistribution of wealth to an extent, but not necessarily. It's kind of like using what you have to be able to create opportunities for other people. And again, there's definitely been periods where we've not had much social impact because we've not been able to do the things that we set out to do. But I think in the long term, if I've been able to create something that has helped other people get that leg up and to be able to get started, and even if it's just a couple of one-to-ones with somebody that's really helped them with a business plan or helped them apply for funding, like for me, that is kind of just what I want to do. For me, it doesn't feel like showing up to work every day. For me, it's just kind of more like, this is my life and this is my lifestyle. And so, yeah, the financial privilege side of it, like I think I kind of try and like work it into conversations as early as possible, because I think it's important for people to know that that's part of it for a lot of businesses. There has been a leg up. So for me, how can I use that leg up to kind of pull the next person up behind me, kind of thing?
That's so thoughtful of you. That's still the Mother Teresa's. So, probably during the early stage, what would you say has been a big financial mistake you made while starting?
Okay. Big finance. I don't think we made our biggest financial mistake probably until we got some funding. We got some. Well, it was this loan that we got, this social investment from First Port, and
No.
it would have been great.
And now you have to spend this money.
Well, it was, we basically we got £85,000 in social investment, and the idea was we would invest, we would hire a salesperson,
Okay.
and we would increase our sales,
Okay.
and we would kind of shift a bit of the focus onto kind of corporate workwear and things like that. It just didn't work.
How long did the salesperson have to stay and collect salary without?
It was about 5 months, and we realized actually it's just not happening. Now this is not. I don't think this was down to a specific person or whatnot. But when we got that social investment, I think we got it maybe in like the January, and then the cost of living crisis first became like mainstream news issue in the kind of May, April period. So, not necessarily like a blame situation or anything like that. It was just circumstances. And yeah, it just didn't work. And that happens sometimes. Nobody's got a crystal ball. If there was a playbook that you could read that was like, okay, follow these steps and you'll be successful, the world would look very differently. But some things just don't go to plan. And so we lost a lot of money from kind of pushing through. And then probably on my end, my mistake in that situation was probably not being aware of or kind of ignoring red flags too early on and pushing things, because at the time, you've got staff that have livelihoods and there's a cost of living crisis. Nobody wants to sack somebody. Well, I'm sure some people do, but I don't want to have to let people go at a time that's already terrifying when
You
it's
had
harder
to
to get
bleed a
jobs.
lot of money, then had to now make the hard decision. Maybe probably if you've done maybe the second month, everybody would have gone away.
Yeah.
Be able to save some money. Yeah.
But but again, that's part of the journey. Sometimes losing money is part of the journey. Sometimes making money is part of the journey. But yeah, it's funny because I don't necessarily, mistakes is the correct word to use, but I don't necessarily see mistakes as inherently negative. Because we're all human. We all
Definitely.
make mistakes, and it is part of life. And I think if we dwell on it too much, we don't learn from it as much. But if we kind of see them in a positive way, and it's hard. Sometimes you have you have to allow yourself to grieve in the moment when something goes tragically wrong. Like, so you have to allow yourself that. But for me, I try and as soon as I can switch into that. Okay,
That's happened.
what are we going to do now? So what's next? What have I learned from this? What don't I want to happen again? And that's what I try and do. I'm sure there's things that I haven't learned from, but there we go. Yeah.
The next question will be sort of a twin. So, do you find it hard to get investment now as a social impact company, or is it harder now, or is it easier now?
I think it's harder now for startups. So obviously we're at a different stage now than, there's different types of funding for obviously different stages. I think it's harder because there's more competition. I think it's harder because of things like AI,
Easy to apply now.
easy to apply. So there's more applications and the quality of the applications is higher. And again, I'm, dyslexic. So AI, I find it a really beneficial tool. It's about using it correctly. And there's just not as much money in funding pots at the moment. I think there's been so many things that have happened recently that funding has to get diverted into other areas. So I think it's definitely more difficult. It's funny to think about us at the moment though, because when that's me kind of thinking more about startup funding, and we're not a startup at the moment. Sometimes it feels like it when you've had to pivot and pivot and pivot. like you feel like a startup.
I'm used in a startup mode.
Oh yeah, it's still in startup mode, but I think you do reach a certain point, you reach a certain age as a company where it's like, well, there's not much funding available for you because you surely should have figured it out by now. But actually, a lot of us, because we've had to pivot so much, it's tricky. We've had lots of support over the last couple of years though. So we've just received 20,000 from National Lottery to launch a new project called Emerging Sparks, which is going to be looking at neurodivergent young people and peer support and empowerment. And then we also it was just about a year ago, we had the Postcode Lottery grant. So that was from the players of the People's Postcode Trust. So those have been really instrumental in helping us go through a lot of the changes, develop our new projects, and to be able to relaunch our new space with obviously the big jumbo pivot from a print and embroidery company to back round to co-working and student spaces. But without that funding, it probably would have been impossible or
Very hard.
very, very, very difficult, and most likely probably would have given up, or it would not look the way even close to what it looks like now. So yeah, I would definitely say it's more difficult than it has been in the past, and maybe things will change. I know that the Scottish Government review is kind of coming up in the next year in terms of the aims and kind of goals going forward, particularly for entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. So who knows? I think you can't really guess anything at the moment.
Cross your finger and do it.
Yeah.
That's nice. From our conversation, one of the things that has stood out for me has been the fact that community and community building has been the center of what you have done.
Mm-hmm.
From the time it was in your room till today, where you have a co-working space. It's been community. How do you build a community that people want to belong to? Because it seems that's one of your North Star, sort of the things you do without even thinking about it. How do you do that?
Yeah, I don't know.
You have what's your secret sauce?
Well, I think it's funny because the space that we've built now, and it's not just me, my colleague Helen, with the last couple of years, we have been absolutely grafting together to make it happen. And all we've actually done is a lot of kind of DIY, building studio spaces, and everything's a little rough around the edges. But because of that, it's affordable. So the first thing is people don't have this barrier to access a space where they can come and work and can socialize and meet other people. But second of all, we're all kind of weirdos. So, we've created a co-working, a kind of community-driven co-working space where I think people can just be themselves. And I think we definitely have more of a neurodivergent focus when it comes to who we want to come in and join the space. It's not, you don't have to be neurodivergent to come to Wild Kind and to work with us and to be a part of the community. But we've just kind of found naturally
people like that gravitate towards you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is because of that low, it's the opposite of corporate. Everything, like I said, we've kind of built ourselves, and I think for a lot of people, that feels comfortable, but feels like you can come in and be yourself. You're not worried about accidentally ruining a rug that's or like knocking over something, I don't know, priceless vase. But I don't see any of those around here. But yeah, I think it's just born from authenticity, and so people relate really well to that. And I think another thing as well is kind of community facilitation, and this is nothing against other co-working spaces, because different people need different things. But I think for us, one of us is there all day, every day, and the space is small. So there's somebody there to introduce a new person, facilitate conversation. We make a lunch for everybody every day. You can come, absolutely. Sometimes we'll have, like today we had baked potatoes, and it's just your typical lunchy lunch. It's nothing fancy. but it means people, they kind of down tools and everybody stops and has a chat. And then everybody kind of gets back to work again. I just think it's all those little things that are just real life. It's real what actually happens in communities rather than, again, nothing against corporate spaces, but corporate spaces are very, very corporate and they're very businessy. And so people walk in and they're like, okay, we've got to be businessy when we're in here, but you come into our space and actually you're just like, oh, I can actually just kind of relax a wee bit. And, somebody's, there's, I can just go make myself a cup of coffee. So it's just, I think it's from being authentic and just kind of being needs led rather than aesthetics led or, what we interpret people to need in kind of workspaces led. It's just kind of what people say, like, oh, this would be nice. It's like, oh, okay, let's try and figure it out. And like the other day, somebody, made a comment on the lights being very bright, just because in most workspaces you've got overhead lights. There's not much you can do about it. So I was like, okay, I've gone to IKEA and I'm going to make a canopy just over a couple of the desks, and it can be moved out of the way if needed. But it's just a couple of desks then where if somebody's light sensitive, they can go and sit. So it's just little touches like that I think make people feel appreciated and listened to. I haven't actually finished this canopy yet. I'm going to finish it next week. But it's things like that make people feel, oh, this space isn't for me, not, oh, I'm the customer of this space and I'm here for somebody to make money from me. Yeah.
Do you have a sleeping pod?
I love one though.
Do you have a bean bag that I can lie down?
No, but again, that would be very cool. I mean, we're very small. Like I said, we're 2,000 square foot, but about 3/4 of that is studio spaces. So our actual co-working room's only 500 square foot. So we're teeny at the moment. However, we do have an opportunity to potentially level up next year into a much bigger building that hasn't been built yet and hasn't started being built yet. So we're not getting our hopes up until it actually exists. But if that goes to plan, then we could be looking at, kind of increasing to a 6,000 square foot space.
Wow, from 3,000 to
From
6,000.
2,000 to 6,000.
3,000.
And if all goes to plan, it would mean we would have some more event space and things like that, rather than just being the co-working space that we are just now.
I'm tracking your movement.
You just follow us.
From 300 to 2,000.
Yeah.
Now to 6,000. That's pretty.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. I think as well, like we love the space we're in just now. It's an older building with big windows, great for creatives. But the one issue we have with it just now is we don't have a main door. We have a main door, but we just don't have a main door into the street. So we're in a building with other businesses, and we want that main door. We want that people to see us from the street kind of presence and be like, oh, okay, I'm in the right place right now. And we're in a business complex. It can be a bit harder for people to find us. So that's the goal, is having that main door. Yeah.
In Glasgow.
Being seen from the street. Yeah.
Probably, but this time next year. Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
This time.
We'll see. Yeah.
If you are watching maybe 2026 next year, it should be done.
It's good to watch back in these things as well. Be like, oh yeah, I did actually say then, and look at us now, we've done it.
That would be nice. The next thing I want to ask you is the place of balance, because from your works, from the research I see, you do represent people that are underrepresented, and how do you balance tokenism from being authentic?
Yeah, I think that is a really difficult issue for a lot of organizations in particular, and I think specifically when it comes to representation, because I think no matter what, we all want to be able to show that we are diverse. We all want to be able to show that we are authentic, but how do you do that? A photo shoot is inauthentic. This podcast is inauthentic for sitting here to come and say a thing, and so I think it's always going to be really difficult. But to be honest, I don't think it's something we kind of think about too much in terms of our we just kind of do things. I don't think for us it's something that we stress about or worry about, because it's not been. And obviously when we talk about underrepresented groups, I mean, that's a wide range. And I think for us, our primary focus is obviously kind of neurodivergent. individuals, but we welcome anybody that considers themselves to be underrepresented to come and take part in any of the services, workshops, everything that we do. I think when it comes to like a marketing perspective, it's obviously very, very different, because I think, I don't know if you look at our social media, but we hardly ever post, and it's because we're so busy doing things. And maybe once we get to a point where we're like, okay, let's actually sit down and plan some content, that is when those conversations kind of come up. But I think, I think probably our authenticity maybe comes from, in a way, like a lack of effort. In terms of, we put stuff out there and we hope people kind of come in and participate with it.
Who are you as a person? If we strip out all of these things that you do,
Mhm.
who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah.
I am a elder emo puzzle game lover. Yeah, I definitely consider myself to be like an intuitive and what would the word, like a learner. Like I like learning things. Tomorrow, if all of a sudden, you know, I woke up and I was the only person on earth that existed, I would, you know, I would explore and I would learn and I would kind of try and figure out new things and build things. Like I'm a creative and I like to make things. And I think that's maybe part of obviously becoming an entrepreneur as well. Problem solving, enjoying the builds of things, enjoying kind of helping people. But yeah, I think for me, kind problem solving kind of person is probably my overall or at least what I would see myself as. Maybe others would see it differently.
Can you? Okay. I would like to also know more, little bit about your childhood.
Hmm.
Was there anything in your childhood that showed that you are a problem-solving person? You are. I can call you a selfless person, because why will I sell my flats to go do something that I am definitely sure I'm not going to make profit out of?
To be honest, though, I kind of sometimes feel that actually sometimes helping people for me feels a bit selfish. That it's because I do get a buzz from helping people. So when I help somebody, I'm not actually just being completely selfless, because I am actually getting something from it. Like I'm getting a reward of a good feeling. And I think sometimes people, when we think about being selfish or selfless, we always think about selfishness from the perception or from the like as greed almost. It's like, I want something from this, I want something this, but actually I want that good feeling all the time. So there's I think yeah, sometimes we have to kind of reshape how we think about
Mhm.
our our needs and our wants from situations. I'm definitely not driven by money. It's nice to have it when we have it, but
Yeah, you've made it real selfish.
but I think you have to be a little bit driven by money to be able to be like, okay, actually, for me, I definitely want like a long term career and security, for my family. But that doesn't have to come at the expense of other people. And if I can build something that maybe has some ups and downs, but if it gets to a point where it's like, okay, actually, I can run this company and I can have fun and get back to a point where we can employ people and grow again, then that's great. But I think in a weird way, I was getting to the point now where we've just figured out a lot of stuff recently in terms of like, okay, well, if we've got this, business model where we've got a building, but we've got studio spaces that we rent out to, cover our costs. We wouldn't have known that, and we wouldn't have got to that point had we not gone through all the other pitfalls and things before it. So yeah, while not driven exclusively by money, it's I think you still have to have a little bit in there. Otherwise you would go bankrupt immediately. You would just all the money would go. Even yeah.
Tell me about your childhood.
So I mean I was probably quite an anxious child, but not necessarily kept it hidden quite a lot. And I remember
Where were you born?
Glasgow.
Okay.
So Glasgow, but I grew up in Liverpool. My mum, I think it was probably about 4 or 5, and she moved down to study at university.
Oh, nice.
So obviously me and my sister went with her. And so we lived there. I think we moved back when I went back to Glasgow. It must have been about 11 or 12. Um, and yeah, I was quite an anxious child. I always knew that I was weird, and I always knew that there was something different about me compared to a lot of other kids. But I think when you're little, you kind of keep that to yourself. You don't necessarily, you know it, but you don't have the,
Articulate it.
yeah, and you don't have the emotional maturity to kind of understand it as well. But yeah, I definitely was very, very anxious and would just kind of, you know, I just always felt a little bit uncomfortable in my own skin. Um, and then I did quite well at school for a while, like primary school. But then when I got to secondary school, I think I was just labeled a troublemaker or a naughty kid. And I just, that kind of, I think what it is, like you go into third year and all of a sudden, like the exams just get so much more difficult. And yeah, I left school at 15. Um, now I know that I have ADHD and dyslexia, and I didn't know back then. And I think it's a really common story for a lot of people that have undiagnosed neurodivergence growing up feeling like a weirdo. I don't think weirdo is a bad word, by the way. I think being a weirdo is being cool, so it's fine. But I think there's definitely a lot of us that grew up kind of disenfranchised and totally just unhappy with ourselves because of this, kind of having to trundle through life with a mask on. And luckily, some of us have made it, out the other side. And for other people, life's still very, very difficult because of those experiences growing up. But I think for me, I had always had a really, really loving and supportive family.
Oh, that's nice.
And again, I think coming from a family that have financial stability completely just adds to the way that you end up kind of feeling about yourself as you grow up. And I think those two combined, financial, and I wouldn't say necessarily financial privilege as such, because I know that sometimes having too much financial privilege can cause problems as well. So I think having financial stability and like emotional stability in your home growing up, I just think is a huge, huge kind of privilege in itself for long-term mental health. And I think that then feeds into being able to run a business successfully, because if you've got resilience, if you've got, if you're confident and if you've got a good sense of worth, when things get really hard, you're probably more likely to push through. At least for me, I think that's what my experience has been anyway. You can, just give it one more day and just going to do it when things get tough. I've never really felt super defeated. Maybe a couple of times where I've thought, oh, this is maybe not the right path. But no, I think I've largely, my experiences from growing up and having such a caring family and having all my basic needs met have massively contributed to me being resilient and capable of being able to push through when things get tough.
So you just pretty much highlighted the advantage that's coming from a stable family, both emotionally and financially, has been able to help you become, has become the bedrock of who you are today. In the next 30, 40 years, how will you want your work to be remembered? The work you do with, you currently do now with Wild Kind.
It's funny because a part of me kind of feels like it's not that I don't want it to be remembered, but I think kind of what we're doing just now should be so much more normalized. And I think maybe in a way, if it was, rather than thinking about what would we be remembered for, it would maybe be that, oh, actually, we were one of the first people to start having a more focus on these kind of community type spaces that are third spaces. And I know there's lots of organizations out there kind of doing things like this. But again, a lot of them are quite expensive, or a lot of them are corporate. And I think I think if anything, it would be nice that we would be remembered for being in that early stages of what might shape a better future for other people. Because I think, thinking back to my experience as a child and having like a loving, supportive network, a lot of people haven't had that. But it's never too late to be able to find a supportive network of people, of peers, of, colleagues. And if that's something we can help create, or if it's something we can influence for other people to do. Like, we're not precious about anything. If somebody, starts doing something very similar to what we're doing, that's great. That shows that people are realizing that there's a need for spaces where people, can be themselves and be free and actually kind of communicate on a genuine level. Like, I sometimes feel, again, no disrespect to other co-working spaces, but I sometimes feel like co-working spaces are just like LinkedIn in real life, where you where you go in and everybody's kind of like sitting talking, and then you might strike up a conversation with somebody, but it always feels like a little bit of a pitch, or it feels there's an element of staleness to it. And again, it's not. Maybe it's because I'm just so not from that world at all as well, and so that might be part of it. So yeah, the kind of, taking things back to a more human, genuine connection level. And so yeah, if we were remembered for anything, it would be nice that it was maybe we were part of something that really brings that back into our communities again. I think in Glasgow as well, one of the difficulties is the weather is so bad here that we don't have many community spaces. And obviously there's community centres and things like that, and obviously they all have their benefits too. But I don't know about you, but I don't know many like young people or even like people kind of in their kind of 30s and 40s who would want to like hang out at a community centre. It's not necessarily, there's nothing again bad about that, but it's just there's different needs for different individuals. And so, more community driven spaces that are free, or like at least massively affordable or built into, I love the fact that there's so many of these buildings being built now with really thinking about community living, but they're all for rich people. So if we can take a lot of those concepts and put them together to make more affordable housing and then, kind of co-living spaces as well. Like obviously we're focused on co-working just now, but I'm really passionate about this idea of like co-living spaces too. And so maybe in the future, who knows, but we're just
So let's play a little bit around this. If I should write a check that will really, really work of £10 million for you today, what are you gonna do?
Oh, okay, this is
And
fun one. £10 million. Okay, I would probably, I mean, I don't really know what £10 million even is, like in terms of what I could afford. But let's say money was no object.
yeah,
What I would probably do is take a big bit of land somewhere. I don't know where, just a big bit of land somewhere, and think about designing a kind of, that people are talking about these like 15-minute cities. Try and figure out how to build a little ecosystem that was supportive of community members, that was fulfilling people's basic needs, but that was also self-sufficient. Like, how can we were talking about this today, and it seems a bit silly, but a lot of me and my friends play a computer game just now called Stardew Valley. And it's just a little cozy game. You have a farm and there's, like a blacksmith and things. It's just a game, but it's very addictive. We were kind of like, wow, why can't life actually just be like that again, where we've just got everything that we need and it's all there, and I need to go to the baker's and there's this and that. And I think we've lost something with kind of, I think it's a combination of technology, but a lot of the time when we see these developments of housing estates and it's just cookie cutter houses, and then there's a wee park, and then I know they've put a wee thing there, but we're just losing community. There's no way for us to exist outside of our homes together, and again with the weather. But yeah, I think I would just design a cool village or city and figure and hire all the people that knew how to come in and be like, okay, we can make this sustainable, because wouldn't that be I mean, I think if Earth had a goal, surely it would be like, people don't really need money anymore, or for the basics anyway. Could we create societies where people can just exist and they can grow their own food and they can share, they can support each other, with childcare? That's something that I'm sure we're both is a stressor at the moment. But we have lots of friends that have, my son's at school, so there's parents that have kids of similar ages. We're all kind of struggling, but we've lost something about how we share responsibilities now, because there's been such a period of time where nobody's communicated with each other, where I think as well, not to get like massively anti-capitalist or anything. However, everything has become so monetized that we now don't want to ask for favors from friends because we're kind of like, oh, well, if they're going to babysit, then we kind of need to pay them. So let's just not ask because it might make it weird. And actually, a long time ago, you would get your friend's 16-year-old daughter might come around and babysit and you give her a tenner. And it's not it's not trying to exploit people, but there's like a social contract built when you're offering services for a friend, and it's not really for anything in return other than the fact that you're part of a community. And then when you need a favor,
You can just call it
you
without
just
feeling.
But I feel like we've just lost all of that. We've lost it all. So yeah, if we can build a little
Village.
village or something, that would be cool.
Something funny. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I will leave this part of the conversation in the podcast. So, during this last summer break, I have two Nigerian people in my streets. They have children 6 and 9.
Yeah.
They also have children 6 and 9. So, and the fact that I have to watch my own daughter throughout the day, one of the things that I quickly realized was, at least for me, watching her alone is the same effort it will take for me to watch 5 of them.
Yeah.
So what I will do is I will then call their parent to get them ready for 10 o'clock. I'll come pick them and we'll go to the community library then have lunch there till 1, 2, whatever they want to do. If they want to sleep, if they want to just rest their mind.
Yeah.
It was extremely, they didn't ask me to do it, but I just said the same work it will take me to watch one person is the same work it will take me. So they found it extremely beneficial to them. Now I did that I was just doing that. Now, while recording this podcast, I've had somebody to watch my daughter for 2 days. I took her to one place today.
Yeah.
I took her to the next place, the same day, another day.
Yeah.
And it is not like I'm just taking her to a random place. They already know each other. Sometimes she will tell me she wants to go there. So I'm just, I'm just going back to saying that, having a community is, very, very important.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens when you live in major cities is that community living becomes eroded. When you live in high rises, that's one of the personally, that's one of the major reasons why I moved to Glasgow and stayed in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And in a part of Glasgow that is quiet, slower,
Yeah.
more older people, more people that you can stay with and chat. I stayed in Dubai for about 3-4 years, but I did it, it was a fast.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I used to live in Lagos too. It was a very, very fast-paced city. But, having this kind of community is, it's one of the things that can prolong anybody's life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, it's something you have successfully done, over and over and again. How, maybe I will rephrase that question. How do you think these kind of things can be brought back into daily living, into cities, into environment?
I think probably one of the biggest issues is, and I might be wrong, this is just from my perception, but there seems to be an issue with commercial building ownership. A lot of buildings kind of getting left to rot. And I think that's kind of complicated for many ways, not just it's not just the age of the buildings, and it's not just an absent landlord. It's also things like the rules and regulations around being able to renovate these buildings. Like I think it's a complex issue. But I think, we've lost all these little high streets. We've lost all of these buildings that would have previously been, shops and whatnot. And obviously even Sauchiehall Street now, it's wild that for me, and again, I probably don't understand the industry well enough. I'm kind of like this. The people that own these buildings, why aren't they doing something? Where's their responsibility to make sure that, all of our commercial properties that would previously have been the thing that gets people out and get the community and spaces, like why are they allowed to let the buildings get into I don't fully understand the industry. I don't really know what's going on, so I can only kind of make assumptions as like an outsider on what's kind of happening with it. But I think that's probably one of the contributing factors to lack of communities. If when you go to places and actually there's no shops left anymore, well, there's less reason for people to go out of the house and do it. But I think that's probably always been a little bit of an issue. And I don't think it's not, that technology has kept us in our homes more. And I think, we can look back to before the internet, and obviously I was a kid that grew up playing out my bike, and I went home when the streetlights went off. That was how you knew to go home, because the streetlights went on. Sorry. And kids don't have that freedom anymore. So they're growing up without an understanding of, developing,
the social skills,
the risk assessment, what it means to just go and hang out with your friends somewhere. They're all online. They're all, it's just a totally different world. It's there's so many influencing factors, but like with anything, there's probably going to be a, what do you call it, like a old, it's like eventually like bands that I liked when I was younger, all of a sudden they're all having their reunions now because they know we're an age where we've got money. When I went to get my son's Christmas present a few years ago, it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles again. That's because so I think everything comes in cycles, and I think that, we as adults now, we had this childhood. Maybe there will be like a big change again where we really, really push for low technology. And yeah, I saw somebody recently has released a new phone. It's called a tin can. It's just a house phone.
Oh, really?
But it's for kids. And it's I think it's still maybe a mobile phone, but it just looks like it's called a tin can. It's just like a old school landline to help them have more of a low technology lifestyle. So yeah, who knows?
What would you advise somebody who wants to come into your sector now? What is the roadmap you will give to them to get to a place where it's sort of sustainable, have an impact, being able to balance?
And I mean, I think the first bit of advice I would give is to really understand the social problem that it is that you're trying to address. Because I think a lot of people are like do-gooders, and I mean that in a good sense. Like a lot of people are, they really want to, they're just driven by helping people. But quite often what they see as being like the social impact is actually kind of stuff that's just nice. Like, oh, that would be nice to do. That would be nice to do for people. So if you have a passion for something, so say, for example, you're like, okay, I really want to support working class creatives into the industry. That's a big problem just now, particularly in TV and film. And say, for example, you're like, okay, well, it would be nice to do a project where I could go to, an art school and I could do a thing. And it's like, well, actually, is that the demographic? The demographic at art school, is that actually the demographic that would be helpful? Probably not, because actually we all know that art schools have the same problem, where it's largely, rich middle class kids that get in, and it's the working class kids that don't even get in to begin with. So then you're like, okay, well, actually, then where is that demographic? How can I get in front of them? And then it's looking at, okay, well, how do I actually help them? Like, what is the problem? What is the barriers? So I think sometimes we get so excited about helping people, but we don't actually kind of like work our way down to the root cause of the problem and pinpoint the little changes. Because I think as well with a lot of stuff, or at least this is my way that I like to think about things anyway, is early kind of intervention is kind of more beneficial than waiting until a problem has. And a lot of that is maybe age as well. So maybe like neurodivergent kids and things like that. The earlier we can get in there and support them, the better it's going to be for the long run. So really figuring out what that social impact is, and digging down to get to the absolute core of it and figure out what is the real problem and also what can you actually do about it. And then I think after that, it's I think maybe some of the advice is maybe say as well as like, actually, can you do it? Do you have the stamina? I mean, yourself running a business is really, really difficult as it is. you're essentially running two businesses at once, because you've got this entity that you're trying to generate income from, and then you've got this entity that you're trying to deliver social impact in. Quite often one makes money and one makes you a loss. Sometimes they're both going to make you a loss. And sometimes there's a big overlap as well. There's no right or wrong way to do things. But there's going to be a substantial amount of time that you're not going to pay yourself. There might be times you have to put money in. And it's going to be really, really difficult. And I would never want to put somebody off trying for something. But also I think it's really important that we are realistic about the fact that it's so difficult. It's, and I think in those situations, it's not saying like, okay, that's going to be really difficult, don't go for it. It's like, what extra support do you need to be able to have a shot? Is it that you need more money? Okay, well, where can you get the funding that you need? And where can you get the financial help that you need to be able to really understand cash flows, to really understand, okay, if I get this funding, how do I make sure that it lasts? Or when am I supposed to figure out, okay, that's not working and I need to make changes? And I think as well, somebody that's just starting out, I think as well, probably some of the advice I would give is learn how to look after yourself and learn how to recognize burnout. I'm seeing this as somebody that regularly experiences burnout, because I, even to this day, struggle to stop. I struggle to rest. I have asked ChatGTP, how are you supposed to rest? Because I feel like, but I think again that comes with having ADHD. It's something that you feel like a motor is constantly running, and that is just something, the kind of hyperactivity that comes with it. But it's I really struggle to physically stop, and it sounds a bit cheesy. And if anybody has ADHD and they really struggle with meditation, I would say really push and try. That's definitely something I've found has been massively beneficial. It feels so silly, I think, when your brain is a constant like beehive. But find the things that work for you. Set boundaries for yourself. Set boundaries for other people, and stick with them. Setting boundaries is so much easier at the beginning than it is at the
At the end, so
yeah, especially with other people who,
are
who are,
used to you.
yeah. And I think people that are socially driven are quite often people pleasers as well. They want to do good, but it means that they end up sometimes, people take advantage. But if you set those boundaries from the beginning and learn how to navigate what it is that you're willing to give, and learning how to say no at the beginning, makes it so much easier. Write a contract for yourself. Write like write a policy, a self policy. You're allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. Can be helpful to set those kinds of rules. Whether you actually stick to them or not is another story. But yeah, I've grown a lot, and I've learned a lot about myself and the boundaries that I probably should have set early on. Again, from experience. But
Like from your own impressive. That's a lot to take in. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
So I'm sure you meet with young entrepreneurs in Glasgow. I want us to focus now. What is one mistake that you see them make every single time that's you feel like saying, no, you're not supposed to do this?
A mistake every single time. It's quite a lot. I think probably the thing that comes up a lot, and it's not a huge mistake, but I think it can really be detrimental in the early stages when somebody's trying to apply for funding. But the thing that I see a lot is people not understanding the difference between a customer and a beneficiary. Because obviously when you're a business, people come and they're customers. People come and they're customers. They might be business customers. They might be, everyday customers. But with a social enterprise, you've got customers and you've got beneficiaries. And say, for example, somebody was starting like a community cafe, right? And they might say, well, it's a cafe and everybody can come and everything's low price. Therefore, everybody that comes is a customer and everybody's a beneficiary. And it's like, no, because if somebody comes in and they are, they don't need your help, they're going to be a customer. If somebody comes to you and needs access to services for free, etc., they're going to be
Very
beneficiary.
beneficial.
But I think some people want to just say like, oh, everybody's a customer, everybody's a beneficiary. And now that can be really difficult to figure out depending on what industry you're in, because again, something like a community cafe, you're like, well, how would you know? And that's where you have to do lots of research into who's actually coming, first of all, who's coming to the cafe, what's their background, what is it that they need? Because surely you're not just set up just to be like, a cheap cafe. What is your social aims? What is it what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Who's it you're trying to help? And then who are those people? And then how are they a beneficiary? What is it that you're doing that is giving them something that essentially doesn't cost anything? And again, it's not to say that every single community interest company or social enterprise must be set up in a way where their beneficiaries always get something for free. It might be that it's just low cost. It might just be that it's accessible. But I think being able to really go to a funder and say to them, this is who our beneficiaries are. This is why they come to us. This is what their needs are. And this is who our customer is. They come and they spend money with us because, and this is the products that we give them, and we know that they'll come. So being able to really define the two and break down exactly who they are when it comes to applying for funding in the early stages, I think is really, really, really instrumental. And I think it's actually the last thing people think about quite often because they just want to do good things. And that's great, but it's just with everything, you just want to work it down to the lowest possible bit of data. But it's hard. I think market research in general, it's an absolute nightmare. I hate doing it, but we all have to at some point. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. The last question will be two. No, next one is, what question do you have for the next guest?
Ooh, that's a good one. What question do I have for the next guest? I would say, I'm trying to think of something really juicy. I'm trying to think of something really juicy.
Should we leave that and come back later?
Yeah, I'll have a wee think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you can be too crazy. If you are to create your own world, your own perfect utopia, how will you describe it? That's going to be the last.
Okay. My own utopia. Well, I think I would. I mean, the obvious initial things would be, no war, no world hunger. Like, everybody's kind to one another. And we're like, okay, let's just start from scratch. Let's, more community living. People can grow what they need. People can create what they need within their circles. We're not trying to, we're not having to ship things from across the world. And obviously that's not always possible. International trade is, fantastic. And we would really struggle without it. But when we think about things like fast fashion, we don't need the amount of crap that's going from one place to another that's currently happening. So yeah, I think I would just create a kind of world where everybody just had what they needed. And I think that is actually most of the issues that come in life is from people that either don't have something that they need or they feel like they don't have something that they need, and whether that is because somebody else have it and whatnot. So yeah, easiest way to sum it up is a world where everybody's basic human needs are met, and they have what they need. I think that would be interesting to see how that played out. That would be a good game simulator to set up and see what actually happened. So whether people ended up turning on each other again, we don't know. But okay, back to okay, so that was the question from the previous okay, so my question for the next guest is it's a tricky one. Now all I can think of it is that question.
Give you time now.
Yeah, I'll have a think. So my question for the next guest is, if tomorrow you were able to set laws or rules or instructions for the ultra wealthy, so people that are hoarding, the the kind of vast amount of resources and money that kind of exists right now, what would they do? What rules would they put in place? If they would they put rules in place to force people to either redistribute their wealth, or would they let it slide? Would they keep things the way that they are?
Okay.
And if the rules are in place, what are the rules? What must they do with it? Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.